I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do. The answer to him.
It was an ordinary afternoon at Utah Valley University, students filling the auditorium, cameras rolling, thousands waiting to hear from one of the most influential conservative voices in America. Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of Turning Point USA, stood at the podium, speaking to the crowd with the same confidence that had made him a household name among his supporters. Then, without warning, the sound of a single rifle shot cut through the air. In an instant, panic swept the hall. Gasps turned to screams as people dropped to the ground, others running for cover. Security rushed forward, but it was already too late. Charlie Kirk collapsed on stage, struck by the bullet from a sniper's rifle more than 200 yards away. Witnesses say he never even had a chance to react, his notes scattered across the floor, the microphone still live as chaos erupted. Emergency medical teams stormed the stage, performing chest compressions, but the wound was catastrophic. Within seconds, America's most prominent young conservative activist, a man who had built a political empire before the age of 30, was gone. News of Charlie Kirk's assassination spread instantly, breaking alerts flashing across every major network, dominating social media feeds, and igniting a storm of reactions from politicians, celebrities, and ordinary citizens. Vigils were organized overnight, supporters flooded the internet with tributes, and conservative leaders framed his death as nothing less than an attack on their movement. Across the country, his name trended as millions argued, mourned, and speculated about what his death meant for the future of American politics. But away from the headlines, the silence of his own family raised questions no one expected. As tributes poured in from Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Tucker Carlson, many noticed what was missing: Charlie's closest relatives. His parents, Robert and Connie Kirk, issued no statement. His sister remained absent from public view. Even his in-laws, usually invisible in his political life, stayed silent. Their absence stood in stark contrast to the loud, almost theatrical mourning on the national stage. For a man who had built his public image on family values and Christian ideals, the lack of visible support from his own bloodline felt jarring, and it raised deeper questions about fractures that had long remained hidden behind the polished surface of his political brand. Before she became the public face of Charlie Kirk's legacy, Erica's life began in the suburban neighborhoods of Scottsdale. Known for its desert landscapes, luxury homes, and conservative leanings, it was the backdrop of her childhood, a place where appearances mattered, but private struggles were often hidden. Her parents divorced early. That fracture in the family came at a formative age. While other children grew up in households with two parents, Erica's home life shifted suddenly. The divorce left its mark, shaping the way she would later speak about resilience, faith, and the meaning of family. Her mother, quietly raising her alone, kept far from the spotlight. Unlike the world her daughter would eventually marry into, Erica's mother chose privacy over publicity. She avoided interviews, avoided cameras, and kept her life separate from the political theater her daughter would later inherit. Yet, her presence was steady, a single parent balancing the weight of responsibility, guiding her child through years that were far from easy. She taught Erica compassion, strength, and survival. Through those years, Erica's mother instilled lessons not from podiums or speeches, but through action. She took her daughter to volunteer at soup kitchens, teaching her empathy for those with less. She demonstrated strength by managing on her own when support was absent. And most importantly, she modeled survival, the quiet endurance that comes from facing hardship without applause, a quality Erica herself would later call upon in the darkest chapter of her life. In 2021, Erica married Charlie. It was a union that blended faith, politics, and personal ambition. By then, Charlie Kirk had become one of the most visible faces of American conservatism, and Erica, with her Catholic background and shared beliefs, seemed to fit perfectly into the image of a rising political power couple. Their marriage was more than just a personal milestone, it was framed as a symbol of Christian values and traditional family ideals that both of them publicly championed. The wedding was small, almost hidden. Unlike the grand celebrations often associated with public figures, theirs was strikingly modest. Few photos surfaced, and the event itself was kept largely private, attended only by a close circle of friends and allies. For a man who built his career on constant media exposure, this moment stood out for its restraint. To many, it seemed like an effort to preserve a piece of normalcy in lives already consumed by politics. Her parents? Nearly invisible. Those who expected to see Erica's family prominently involved were left puzzled. Her mother and father, though alive, remained almost entirely out of the picture. No interviews. No social media tributes. Not even public acknowledgement of their presence at the ceremony. Their silence contrasted sharply with the way political figures celebrated the marriage online, leaving outsiders to wonder about the distance between Erica's private family life and her new public identity as the wife of a conservative celebrity. Even the reception became a turning point USA celebration. When the party began, it looked less like a traditional wedding and more like a political gathering. Instead of speeches from family, the focus shifted to the organization Charlie had built, Turning Point USA. The atmosphere blurred the lines between love story and political branding, with guests praising not just the couple's union, but the movement they represented. In the end, their wedding reception became less about two people starting a life together, and more about reinforcing the conservative empire they were building side by side. 4 years later, the phone rang. It was September 10, 2025, the day that would change everything. The call came suddenly, piercing through the quiet of an ordinary afternoon. On the other end was the kind of news no wife ever expects to hear. Erica was sitting at her mother's hospital bedside in Phoenix. The setting was intimate, far removed from the public stage her husband so often occupied. Her mother, frail and in need of care, had been admitted for treatment, and Erica had chosen to be there with her. Surrounded by the sterile smell of disinfectant, the soft beeping of hospital machines, and the dim light of a recovery ward, Erica had been balancing her private role as a daughter with the constant demands of being a public figure's wife. When she learned Charlie had been shot, the words landed like a thunderclap. A sniper's bullet had struck her husband during a speech at Utah Valley University. In an instant, the world she knew shattered. As her mother lay in a hospital bed, Erica faced her own sudden trauma, the unthinkable reality that her husband, the father of her 2 children, was gone. That moment fused her private life and public identity together in a way she could never escape. 11 days later, the memorial. State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona, was transformed into a stage of grief and spectacle. More than 60,000 people filled the seats, a crowd so large that the event felt less like a solemn farewell and more like a national moment of reckoning. The atmosphere was charged, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and defiance. Not just a funeral, but a rally. The tone was unmistakable. Instead of hushed mourning, the speeches carried the cadence of campaign rallies. Giant video screens displayed tributes, music swelled with patriotic intensity, and applause erupted at moments that would normally invite silence. What should have been a day of closure became a declaration that the movement Charlie Kirk helped build would not die with him. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Tucker Carlson. They were all there, each taking the stage to speak, each framing Charlie's death in the context of politics and prophecy. Trump, the former president, called him a warrior. J.D. Vance, now a rising Republican star, cast his legacy as part of America's future. Tucker Carlson, with his trademark intensity, declared Kirk's assassination an attack on every conservative family in the nation. Their presence made clear, this was no ordinary memorial service. A show of power, wrapped in mourning. The gathering became a demonstration of strength. Security was tighter than at most airports, snipers lined the rooftops, and armored vehicles ringed the stadium. But inside, the message was unity, resilience, and continuation of the cause. Tears flowed, yes, but so did chants, pledges, and vows to carry Charlie's mission forward. It was grief, transformed into momentum, mourning, dressed as mobilization. Then came Erica's words. The stadium fell into silence as she stepped to the podium. Dressed in black, Bible in hand, Erica Kirk stood before tens of thousands, not just as a grieving widow, but as the new face of her husband's movement. The weight of expectation pressed against her shoulders, yet her voice carried across the vast arena with a mix of pain and determination. She told her daughter, "Daddy's on a work trip with Jesus." Her words drew gasps, some tears, from the audience. It was the explanation she had given to their little girl, too young to understand death, too innocent to bear the full truth. In that one sentence, Erica revealed both the ache of motherhood and the deep Christian faith that shaped her family's public image. She described seeing Charlie's body, a gray hair he never knew about, and a faint smile. Against the advice of doctors, Erica insisted on viewing him after the shooting. She spoke of how she leaned over his lifeless form, noticing a single gray strand, something he had never realized he carried. She remembered, too, what she swore looked like the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. To her, it was a sign, a final message of peace from a man taken too soon. And then, forgiveness. Erica's tone shifted. What came next stunned even those closest to her. "I forgive the shooter," she said. The words echoed across the stadium, heavy and unexpected. In the face of rage, political division, and calls for vengeance, she offered mercy. Her voice broke. For a moment, grief nearly overtook her. The crowd, hushed, watched a widow balancing between unimaginable pain and unwavering resolve. Then her fist rose. With that gesture, sorrow turned to defiance. "I will carry on Charlie's fight." It was more than a vow. It was a declaration that his mission, his movement, would not end with his death. In that moment, Erica Kirk shifted from grieving widow to political torchbearer, sealing her place as the new leader of the cause her husband had built, the accused assassin, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. A straight-A student. Son of a sheriff's deputy. Raised Mormon. But prosecutors say, he drifted left online, grew radical, and stalked Kirk for over a week. Now, he faces the death penalty. To some, Kirk became a martyr. For his supporters, Charlie Kirk's death was framed as nothing less than a sacrifice for the conservative cause. Churches held vigils, students carried banners with his face, and politicians invoked his name as a symbol of courage. Online, hashtags compared him to fallen soldiers, painting him as a warrior who had given his life in defense of faith, family, and freedom. For this audience, his assassination was not just a crime, it was proof of the dangers conservatives faced in modern America. To others, he remained a provocateur. But outside those circles, the response was starkly different. Critics remembered Kirk not as a hero, but as a divisive figure who thrived on controversy. His years of fiery rhetoric on college campuses, his constant presence in political culture wars, and his hardline positions on issues like immigration and LGBTQ+ rights made him polarizing. For these Americans, his death did not erase the fact that he had built a career by stoking anger and amplifying division. Even in death, he divided America. The arguments raged online and on television. Was Charlie Kirk a defender of freedom, or an instigator of conflict? Was his assassination a tragedy that should unite the nation, or the predictable outcome of a politics built on confrontation? In the end, his passing mirrored his life, a fault line cutting through the heart of the country, reminding everyone that even in death, Charlie Kirk's name could not escape controversy. Turning Point USA surged with new energy. In the days after Charlie Kirk's assassination, what might have been the collapse of a movement instead became its revival. Attendance at events swelled, new chapters were launched on college campuses across the country, and Kirk's followers rallied with greater passion than before. His death, rather than silencing the organization, became the spark that reignited it. Millions raised. Donations poured in from across the nation. Small checks from students, large contributions from wealthy benefactors, and online fundraising campaigns all combined into a tidal wave of financial support. In just weeks, the organization collected more money than it had in some entire years, proof that grief and outrage had been transformed into fuel for political momentum. A movement renewed. Speakers invoked Kirk's name at rallies, his words echoed in podcasts and broadcasts, and his image appeared on banners and posters. To his supporters, the assassination gave Turning Point USA a sense of moral weight it had never carried before, not just a youth movement, but a cause now marked by blood. His death became both a warning and a rallying cry. And at its center, a widow who turned grief into mission. Erica Kirk stepped forward, not just as a mourner, but as the new leader of the empire her husband had built. Her voice, once secondary to Charlie's, now carried the message of faith, forgiveness, and political resolve. A sniper's bullet silenced Charlie Kirk. The shot at Utah Valley University ended his life in seconds, a clean, devastating strike that left thousands in shock and millions in mourning. One bullet turned a political firebrand into a martyr, and an ordinary day on campus into a moment that would be replayed on every screen in America. But the echoes, family silence, political spectacle, and national division, still reverberate. The days that followed revealed not just grief, but fractures. Parents who never spoke. In-laws who remained shadows. A memorial service that looked more like a campaign rally than a farewell. And a nation split once again, some hailing Kirk as a prophet cut down in his prime, others calling him a provocateur whose words finally caught up with him. In America's culture wars, even death becomes part of the fight. The assassination didn't just end a life. It deepened the conflict, sharpened the battle lines, and ensured that Kirk's name would live on as both weapon and wound. His death became a story not of closure, but of continuation, proof that in modern America, the struggle never stops, not even at the grave.